Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. What is the Reece Committee? When researching about a different topic, I came across the Reece Committee and vaguely remembered running across this before, and I thought it was worth mentioning again. I was unfamiliar with this committee, or not as familiar with it as I was the church committee. However, the relevance of what I read about pertains to what we are seeing today as much as the church committee does, in my opinion. For those not familiar with the Reece Committee, let me tell you a little bit about what it is. The Reece Committee is another name for the Select Committee to investigate tax-exempt foundations and comparable organizations from 1952 to 1954 by the U.S. House of Representatives. It was also known as the Cox Committee. They were named after the two chairmen, B. Carroll Reece and Edward E. Cox. The committee was originally created by House Resolution 561 during the 82nd Congress. The committee investigated the use of funds by tax-exempt organizations to see if they were being used to support communism. In April 1952, the Select Committee to investigate tax-exempt foundations and comparable organizations, or just the Cox Committee, led by Edward E. Cox of the House of Representatives, began an investigation of the educational and philanthropic foundations and other comparable organizations which are exempt from federal taxes to determine whether they were using their resources for the purposes of which they were established, and especially to determine which such foundations and organizations are using their resources for un-American activities and subversive activities, or for the purposes not in the interest or tradition of the United States. Unhappy with the Cox Committee's conclusions, Representative Reece pushed for a continuation of its work. In April 1954, the House authorized the Reece Committee. Unlike its predecessor, which limited its attention to generalities, the Reece Committee mounted a comprehensive inquiry into both the motives for establishing foundations and their influence on public life. The investigative inquiry was headed by Norman Dodd, a former banker. The final report was submitted by Norman Dodd, and because of its provocative nature, the committee became subject to attack. In the Dodd report to the Reece Committee on Foundations, he gave a definition of the word subversive, saying that the term referred to any action having its purpose the alteration of either the principle or the form of the United States government by other than constitutional means. He then argued that the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, and Carnegie Endowment were using funds excessively on projects at Columbia, Harvard, University of Chicago, and the University of California in order to enable oligarchical collectivism. He stated, quote, "The purported deterioration in scholarship and in the techniques of teaching which lately has attracted the attention of the American public has apparently been caused primarily by a premature effort to reduce our meager knowledge of social phenomenon to the level of an applied science," close quote. He stated that his research staff had discovered that in 1933 to 1936, a change took place which was so drastic as to constitute a revolution. They also indicated conclusively that the responsibility for the economic welfare of the American people had been transferred heavily to the executive branch of the federal government, that a corresponding change in education had taken place from an outside of the local community, and that this revolution had occurred without violence and with the full consent of an overwhelming majority of the electorate. He also stated that this revolution could not have occurred peacefully or with the consent of the majority unless education in the United States had been prepared in advance to endorse it. Over the next set of videos, I will introduce you to the players on the Cox-Reece Committee. We will begin with the first chairman, Edward E. Cox, and the second chairman, B. Carroll Reece, and also the chief investigator during the Reece Committee, Norman Dodd. We will also cover the Dodd Report and also what the old guard faction that is so noted, as well as the quote-unquote revolution noted in the Dodd Report. I believe every bit of this pertains to a lot of what we see going on currently.